Let's get started. Story number 1.
The summer I turned 18, I worked at a lakeside resort in the middle of nowhere, a tiny town called Clearwater. It wasn't much, just a few rustic cabins along the shore of the lake and a small restaurant that barely made enough money to stay open. I had no plans that summer, just a desire to get away from home and have a change of scenery. Um, the job wasn't glamorous, but it was easy. I took reservations, helped with cleaning the cabins, and sometimes served food in the restaurant. Most of the guests were older couples or families with young kids, and the evenings were quiet. There were only a few staff members, including Sam, the manager, a couple of part-timers who worked the front desk, and a few housekeepers. It wasn't hard to get along with everyone, even though the whole place felt like it was stuck in a time warp. The decor was outdated, and the grounds had a sort of eerie stillness to them. The lake, in particular, had this strange quality, calm and clear during the day, but somehow unsettling at night when the fog would roll in thick across the water. I had heard people talk about the place having bad energy, but I thought it was just small-town superstition. It all started the first weekend I was there, when a family checked in late on a Friday night. They were strangers, arriving at almost 10 p.m. after a long drive, their faces tired but eager for a weekend getaway. The mother, Sarah, was friendly, but the father, Jason, seemed distant. They had 2 kids, Jack, a quiet 10-year-old boy, and Emily, a bubbly 6-year-old. When they arrived, I was in the office alone, and Sam had gone home for the night, so I was responsible for checking them in. I handed over the keys and mentioned that their cabin was one of the older ones, but everything was in good condition. They thanked me and left, carrying their bags and talking to each other in low voices as they walked towards cabin 6. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, something about them felt off. The next morning, I was working the front desk when Sarah came back, looking unusually pale. She didn't seem upset, but there was something wrong in her eyes, like she had seen something she couldn't explain. She asked if I had heard anything strange the night before. Strange? I repeated, confused. Like, sounds, she clarified. I don't know how to describe it, like whispers. I woke up and thought I heard voices, like someone was talking just outside the cabin. I told her I hadn't heard anything, but I assured her that the place was quiet and peaceful at night. She nodded, but didn't seem convinced. She went back to her cabin, but the unease lingered in the air. That evening, around dinner time, I was walking near the lake when I saw Jack by the water, staring out into the fog. He didn't seem to notice me at first, so I stopped for a moment, watching him. There was something strange about his posture. He stood unnaturally still, like he was waiting for something. After a few seconds, I called out to him, and he turned slowly, as if startled by my voice. "Jack? Everything okay?" I asked. He looked at me blankly, then gave a small, nervous smile. "Just looking at the fog," he said quietly, his voice distant. He didn't seem like the same kid I'd seen the day before. There was a hollow quality to his voice, as though he were somewhere else entirely. "You shouldn't be out here alone," I said, trying to sound calm. "Your parents are probably looking for you." He nodded absently, then turned and walked back toward the cabin without another word. Something about the way he moved felt wrong. It wasn't like a kid who was running to get back to his parents. He was walking slowly, deliberately. It was almost as if he were in a trance. Later that evening, I saw Sarah again, this time in the restaurant. She was sitting at a table with Jason, and they both seemed distant, like they were just going through the motions of dinner. Jack and Emily were at a separate table, though Jack wasn't eating. He was just sitting there, staring at his plate, his face expressionless. Emily, on the other hand, was talking non-stop, but her voice had an odd pitch to it, almost too high-pitched and strained. When I went over to check on them, Sarah caught my eye and gave me a tight smile. "Sorry, it's just been a long day," she said softly. "We're not used to the quiet. The kids especially, they're not sleeping well." I nodded, offering a sympathetic smile. "It takes a while to adjust to the peace around here." She didn't seem to hear me, her gaze drifting to the window where the fog had already begun to roll in thick across the lake. Her lips pressed together in a thin line, and she quickly turned back to her husband. The next few days were uneventful, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Sarah and Jason seemed more withdrawn, and Jack was becoming increasingly agitated. Emily started to act out, throwing tantrums and speaking in strange, disjointed sentences. When I asked if everything was okay, Sarah just told me that they'd been going through some personal stuff and that the kids were adjusting poorly. But something felt wrong, like there was a deeper issue no one was talking about. On the third night of their stay, things took a turn. I was working late at the front desk when I heard frantic knocking on the door. I rushed over and opened it to find Sarah standing there, looking panicked. Her eyes were wide and her hair was disheveled, as if she had just been running. "I need help," she said, voice shaking. He's gone." I was immediately on alert. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" I I don't know," she said, wringing her hands. "He was in the cabin. Then he wasn't. He just walked out. We can't find him anywhere." I grabbed a flashlight and ran with her to cabin 6. The door was wide open, the lights still on inside. There was no sign of Jack. His bed hadn't been slept in, and his shoes were missing. I called Sam, and he came rushing over. We checked the surrounding area by the lake, through the woods, even the nearby cabins, but there was no sign of Jack. It was like he had just disappeared. Sam called the police, and they arrived hours later, combing the area with dogs, but still, nothing. No tracks, no scent, no clues. By the time morning came, we were all exhausted and frightened, but there was still no sign of the boy. The police left, and Sam made arrangements for the family to leave. He told Sarah that they'd find Jack, that he couldn't have gone far. But Sarah wasn't listening. She was staring into the fog, her eyes hollow and distant. "You don't understand," she said softly. "He's gone. He's already gone." That night, after everyone left, I went to the lake. It was unusually quiet. No wind, no sounds, just the soft ripple of water against the shore. The fog was so thick that I could barely see in front of me. As I stood there, I heard something, a soft whisper like a breath, then another, this time louder, clearer. "Help me." I froze. My heart thudded in my chest as I strained to listen. The voice was coming from the lake. "Help me," it repeated, almost pleading. I shone my flashlight toward the water, but all I saw was fog. "Jack," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is that you?" For a moment there was nothing, just the fog, thick and still. Then I saw it. A figure standing in the water just beyond the shore. It was blurry, indistinct, like a shadow among the mist. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel its presence. The air grew colder, and the whispering voice grew louder, now echoing in my mind. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the shape. It was like I was being drawn toward it, pulled by some invisible force. Then, the figure started to move. Slowly it began to walk toward the shore, its steps silent, its form becoming clearer with each step. As it emerged from the water, I saw the face. It was Jack, but not Jack as he had been before. His skin was pale, almost ghostly, his eyes wide open and unblinking, but empty. He was staring at me, but it was like he wasn't seeing me at all. The whispering voice, now unmistakably his, echoed again. "Help me." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, in one swift motion, he lunged toward me. I woke up in my bed the next morning, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. The morning sun was filtering through the curtains, and everything seemed normal. But I knew it wasn't. I haven't returned to Clearwater since that night. They say the resort is still there, but I know better than to go back. Whatever I saw that night, it wasn't Jack. And whatever was in that fog, whatever called to me from the water, it's still out there. Story the end.
Story number 2.
It started on the second week of July, the kind of summer heat that sticks to your skin even at night, the kind that makes everything feel slower and heavier. My cousin Jenna and I were staying at our grandparents' old lake house in Vermont, while our parents were traveling through Europe. It was supposed to be a low-key summer, just us, the lake, and the isolation of woods surrounding the property. The house was about a 10-minute walk from the nearest neighbor, with a cracked driveway and a wide porch that overlooked the water. It creaked constantly. The place was older than either of us, and it had that aged wood smell, partly nostalgic, partly sour, like something had been left too long in the heat. We were both 17. Jenna had her camera and a notebook full of paranormal theories she kept scribbling in. I didn't believe in any of that, not really, but she was obsessed with ghost stories and strange happenings, especially when it involved our grandparents' place. Every summer, she would talk about how weird things always happened here. Flickering lights, voices on the dock at night, and once, she swore she saw someone staring from the tree line. That summer, something did feel different. The first few days were normal. We swam in the lake, made grilled cheese, and sat out on the porch eating popsicles while listening to music. But by the third night, things began to shift. We were lying in our beds, windows open to let in some breeze, when I heard something outside. It was past midnight. Jenna was asleep. The noise wasn't anything loud, just footsteps, soft and slow, crunching the gravel outside the house. My first thought was maybe a deer, but these steps were too steady, too deliberate. They stopped right beneath my window. I held my breath, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard something that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it, a whisper, a man's voice, just a single word, close. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I kept telling myself it was my imagination or maybe even a dream. But in the morning when I went outside, there were boot prints in the dust on the gravel, big ones. They led from the driveway, looped around the side of the house, and stopped right beneath my window. I didn't tell Jenna. I didn't want to feed into her ghost obsession. A day later, we were on the dock when she brought up something strange without knowing what had happened to me. "Did you move the screen door last night?" she asked, not looking up from her notebook. "No. Why?" "I heard it creak open and slam, twice." We looked at the house. From the dock, you could barely see the porch in full, but the old screen door always creaked. Loudly. The wood slats were warped, and even the wind could make it rattle. But slamming? That meant someone had touched it. I tried brushing it off. Wind, maybe, or a raccoon. But Jenna's face didn't change. She just closed her notebook. That night, I kept the window shut. It was unbearable in the heat, but I didn't care. I checked the locks on the doors twice and tried to sleep. Around 2 a.m., Jenna knocked on my door. Her hair was a mess, her eyes wide. "Something's walking outside again." I followed her into the hallway, and we stood silently by the living room window. From there, we could see part of the driveway, dimly lit by the porch light. At first, nothing, just the soft hum of bugs and wind rustling the trees. Then a shadow moved, at the edge of the tree line. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. They were standing perfectly still, just beyond the reach of the light, facing the house. We didn't speak. I remember the thump of my heart in my ears and Jenna's fingernails digging into my arm. The figure didn't move for a long time. Then it turned and slowly disappeared into the woods. We stayed up the rest of the night with kitchen knives beside us. By sunrise, we agreed we needed to tell someone. We called our parents, but they thought we were exaggerating, maybe spooked by being alone. They promised to call the neighbor to check in on us. That made us feel a little better. Mr. Ryland, a retired cop who lived down the road, came by that afternoon with his German Shepherd. He did a quick walk around, looked for footprints. He didn't find anything new. "You girls should be fine," he said, patting the dog's head. "Probably just a drifter passing through. Don't leave the doors open at night. Call me if you hear anything." That was it. The next few nights were quiet, though the air in the house felt heavier, like it was holding something back. Jenna was more on edge. She stopped writing in her notebook and started closing every curtain in the house by 6 p.m. I caught her whispering to herself once in the bathroom, like a prayer or maybe a chant, but she wouldn't admit it. Then the power went out. It was 4 days after Mr. Ryland came by. A thunderstorm had rolled through during the afternoon, but it wasn't bad. Just wind and light rain. We were making pasta when everything flickered and went dark. The stove, the lights, the fans, everything. "Great," I said, "just what we need." We lit a few candles and sat in the living room. Jenna was quiet. She kept looking out the front window. "You hear that?" she whispered. I strained my ears. At first, nothing. Then I heard it, the faint creak of the screen door. We both stood up. "It could be the wind," I said again, but my voice was thin. Then came a knock. 1, 2, 3. It wasn't frantic, just steady, soft, a human rhythm. Someone was at the door. We didn't move. Then came a voice, same as the one I heard outside my window. "Close. Closer now." Jenna screamed. I grabbed her arm and dragged her upstairs. We locked ourselves in the bathroom and didn't leave until daylight. When we came down, the screen door was hanging open. swaying gently in the breeze. There were muddy footprints in the kitchen, bare feet. We left that day. Mr. Ryland drove us into town, and we stayed with a family friend until our parents returned early. They had the house inspected, locks changed, cameras installed, but nothing came of it. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of who or what had been there. Jenna never went back. I returned once a year later with my dad during the day, just to help pack some things. The house felt different, emptier, like it had given up some secret. In one of the closets, I found Jenna's notebook. I don't know why I opened it, but on the last page, in her handwriting, were 3 lines. It's not the house, it's the lake. He comes when it gets hot enough to wake him. I never asked what she meant. I don't want to know. Story the end.
Story number 3.
When I was 17, I spent the summer with my cousin Ryan in a small lake town called Willow Ridge, about 3 hours north of our home in the city. My parents had taken a long trip overseas for work, and instead of dragging me along, they thought it would be more fun if I spent time somewhere I could enjoy being a teenager. Ryan's family had a cabin by the lake, the kind of rustic place that didn't have much going on except woods, water, and an old ice cream stand on the corner of Main Street. At first, I wasn't thrilled, but I figured a summer without curfews and constant check-ins was worth it. Ryan was a year older and had his license, which made things easier. Most nights, we hung out by the lake, cruised around town, or met up with some of his local friends. One of them was a girl named Katie. She had this odd energy about her, friendly but always looking past you like she was scanning for something else. She wore this faded black hoodie even when it was 90 degrees out, said she got cold easy, but none of us really bought it. The first time I met her, she asked me if I believed in ghosts, just out of nowhere, like it was the most normal way to introduce yourself. I shrugged and said, not really. She smiled but didn't laugh. You will. That was in late June. The nights were already humid, with mosquitoes thick in the air, and the lake still cold enough to sting when you jumped in. By July, we were in a routine. Wake late, swim, mess around, grab food, hang out by the fire pit near the shore. Life was easy. But then we started hearing about something strange. Not from Katie, but from other kids around town. There was talk about a girl who went missing the summer before. Her name was Ava, and she'd been visiting her grandparents. No one ever found her. Supposedly, she'd gone out walking near the woods one night and just vanished. They searched for weeks. Divers dragged the lake, police combed the woods, but nothing. No trace. Not even a shoe. People in town said she probably just ran away. Others weren't so sure. One night, we were all sitting around the fire. Me, Ryan, Katie, and 2 other guys, Lucas and Derek. We were halfway through a 6-pack Ryan had managed to buy with a fake ID, and the night air felt thick, like a thunderstorm was just waiting behind the clouds. Someone brought up Ava. I think it was Derek. She didn't run, he said, his voice low. She was taken. Katie stirred the fire with a stick. That's what I think, too. Ryan chuckled. Oh, come on. Don't start with that ghost crap again. Katie didn't smile this time. It's not crap. People say they see her sometimes, especially around the dock. You just have to look hard enough. Lucas snorted. So she's a ghost now? Katie stared at the flames. She's not alone. That shut everyone up. For a while, we just listened to the fire crackle and the bugs hum. Katie stood and walked down toward the water. We watched her silhouette disappear into the trees. No one said anything, but we all felt it. That shift in the air, like something just changed. A few minutes later, she came back. Her hoodie was off, tied around her waist. Her bare arms were covered in something. At first, I thought it was just dirt, but when she got closer, I saw they were covered in scratches. Thin, red lines up and down her arms like brambles had clawed her. What the hell happened to you? Ryan asked, standing up. Katie didn't answer. She just sat back down and stared at the fire. The next day, she didn't answer her phone. Ryan said she probably just went home and passed out, but I wasn't so sure. I kept thinking about those scratches, how fresh they looked, and the blank expression on her face when she came back. Later that afternoon, we drove into town for food. As we passed the dock near the lake's far edge, I saw someone standing at the end of it. A girl. Long dark hair, pale legs, barefoot. She wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the water. Stop the car, I said. Ryan looked at me like I was nuts, but pulled over. When I pointed toward the dock, She was gone. "What did you see?" he asked. I wasn't sure how to answer. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to admit it looked like the missing girl. But even if I'd said it, it wouldn't have been the truth. Because that girl on the dock, she wasn't just a person. There was something wrong with her. The way she stood, the stillness, like she wasn't breathing or alive. That night, Katie still wasn't answering. We swung by her house, but no one was home. The porch light was off, and her mom's car wasn't in the driveway. Ryan suggested we drive around, maybe check the lake trail. I wasn't thrilled about wandering through the woods at night, but something told me we should go. We parked near the trailhead just as the sun was setting. The trail was narrow and overgrown, lined with trees that leaned in too close. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No bugs, no frogs, not even the sound of water. Just our footsteps and the occasional crack of a twig. Then we found her hoodie. It was draped over a tree branch, torn down one sleeve. Ryan picked it up and turned it over in his hands. There were smudges on it, mud or maybe something else. I didn't want to guess. "We should call someone," I said. Ryan nodded, but before he could say anything, we heard it. A scream. High-pitched, sharp, and close. Then nothing. We both froze. "Katie?" Ryan called out. Silence. Then, just ahead, a flicker of movement. A shadow sliding between trees. Ryan took off running, and I had no choice but to follow. The trees closed in, the ground sloped down toward the lake, and my breath burned in my throat. We came out near a clearing that opened to the shore. She was there. Katie, standing knee-deep in the water, staring across the lake. Her face was blank, her hair soaking wet, her eyes wide but not blinking. Ryan stepped forward. "Katie, what the hell are you doing?" She didn't move. Then she spoke, but it wasn't her voice. It was off, hollow. "She wants someone else." Ryan stopped. I stepped closer. "What are you talking about?" Katie turned to me, and I'll never forget her face. Her eyes were full of tears, but her mouth smiled. Tight, painful, like it was forced. "She took Ava. She needs someone to take her place." And then she screamed. But this time, it wasn't just her voice. There was something else layered beneath it. Something ancient and hungry and wrong. The water around her started to churn, and a cold wind blasted off the lake, that cutting through us like ice. Ryan grabbed my arm. "We need to go." We ran. Branches tore at us, roots tripped our feet, but we didn't stop. Not until we were back in the car, gasping and shaking. We drove straight to the sheriff's office, but when we told them what happened, they just nodded like they'd heard it all before. An officer said they'd look into it, but I saw the way he looked at us, like we were just more stupid kids with ghost stories. The next day, Katie was gone. Her mom said she'd gone to stay with a friend in another town, but we didn't believe it. Her phone was disconnected. No one else had seen her. And the hoodie? Gone from Ryan's room. Like it had never been there. A few days later, we left Willow Ridge. My parents came home early, and Ryan didn't argue. The night before we left, I went down to the dock alone. I stood at the edge, listening to the soft lap of water and watching the trees across the lake. Then I saw her, just for a second. A girl, standing ankle-deep in the water, hair wet and hanging over her face. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I turned and walked away. I don't go back to Willow Ridge anymore. Neither does Ryan. Sometimes we talk about that summer, but we never say her name. Not Ava's, not Katie's, not the thing in the water, because I think she's still waiting, and I think she's still hungry. Story the end.
Story number 4.
Every summer since I was 13, my cousin Kyle and I would spend 2 weeks at our grandparents' cabin in northern Minnesota. It was tradition. Bonfires, lake swims, night fishing, and avoiding the bloodthirsty mosquitoes that seemed to thrive in the humid heat. The cabin sat deep in the woods, past a dirt road that stretched off the main highway. There were only a handful of cabins nearby, most of them empty or seasonal rentals. Our grandparents used to live there full-time before they got too old to manage the place, and now they only visited occasionally. That summer, Kyle and I were 19. No adults. No rules. Just 2 weeks to do whatever we wanted. The first few days were everything I remembered from our childhood. We swam, drank beer we snuck in, and told ghost stories by the fire. It felt like the kind of summer I'd always imagined, the kind I'd miss when I got older. The cabin hadn't changed much. Still creaky floors, that weird pine scent baked into the walls, and old VHS tapes stacked by the television. It was comforting. The lake shimmered in the day and turned black at night, and the forest surrounding it grew so thick you could stand just 10 feet in and disappear completely. We'd often take Kyle's grandpa's old canoe and paddle across the water to fish or just float in silence. It started on the fifth night. We were sitting around the fire, the logs crackling as the air turned cooler. There wasn't much wind, and the sky was unusually clear. I was telling Kyle about a dream I'd had the night before, something weird about the woods being filled with voices when we heard it. A snapping sound, not from the fire, but from the edge of the tree line. It wasn't loud, just a single crack, like a foot stepping on a dry branch. Kyle glanced over his shoulder. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I said, standing up and peering into the woods. "Probably a deer." "That close?" he asked. "Usually they make more noise." We waited, listening. Nothing followed. No rustling, no movement, just the steady chirp of crickets and the lapping of water in the distance. Eventually, we chalked it up to a raccoon or something and forgot about it. The next morning, Kyle went out early to fish. I slept in and only noticed something was wrong when he came back around 10 a.m., pale and quiet. He dropped his tackle box on the porch and sat on the steps staring into the woods. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just shook his head slowly. "There was someone across the lake," he finally said. "Someone?" Kyle looked at me, and I could see in his eyes that he wasn't messing around. He was standing at the edge of the trees, just watching me. Didn't move. I waved, but he didn't do anything, just kept standing there. I walked out to the porch and sat next to him. Maybe it was another camper? "There's no one staying in the cabins right now. You saw the drive-in. Every place is dark." We sat in silence for a minute. I felt the sun on my skin, but it didn't warm me. Something about Kyle's tone had unsettled me. "Did you see where he went?" He shook his head. I turned to grab my rod, and when I looked back, he was gone. We didn't fish that afternoon. Instead, we stayed close to the cabin, occasionally glancing across the lake. But the trees stood still, and no one appeared. That night, I double-checked the locks and windows before going to bed. The cabin always felt safe, but something had shifted. I dreamed again, this time of someone standing outside my window, tapping on the glass with one finger. The following evening, we went out in the canoe. The water was calm, and the sun was setting in vibrant streaks of orange and purple. Kyle was quiet, still shaken. I kept making jokes, trying to lift the mood. We drifted near the opposite shore where he said he'd seen the figure. The trees here looked older, denser. I glanced along the shore, looking for anything unusual. There, halfway behind a birch tree, I saw it, a small shape, partially hidden. I squinted and realized it was a bundle of cloth. Kyle noticed too and steered us closer. We pulled up near the shore, and I jumped out, my boots sinking slightly into the muddy edge. It was a jacket, folded in a strange way, and on top of it a small glass jar. Inside the jar was what looked like a tuft of hair and several teeth, human teeth. I stepped back instantly, bile rising in my throat. "What the hell?" Kyle whispered behind me. I shook my head. "We shouldn't be here." We pushed off the shore and paddled hard back to the cabin. That night, we didn't speak much. We both felt it, the eyes in the dark, the weight of something unseen. I thought of calling the local sheriff, but what would we say? We found a creepy jar with teeth in the woods. They'd probably think we were messing around. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It was faint but steady. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. It was coming from the window above my bed. The room was mostly dark, except for the soft blue glow of moonlight spilling in. I didn't want to look, but I did. A face, right up against the glass. Pale, thin, mouth slightly open, eyes too wide. It was gone in a second, vanishing before my brain could fully process it. I leapt out of bed, heart hammering, and ran to Kyle's room. He was already sitting up, eyes wide. "You saw it too?" I whispered. He nodded slowly. "We need to leave. Tomorrow." We packed up at dawn. We didn't talk much while we loaded the truck. Something heavy was pressing down on us. We drove in silence until we hit the highway. It wasn't until we were over an hour away that we began to relax. We laughed nervously about it all, trying to convince ourselves it was just someone playing a prank. But 3 days later, I got a call from Kyle. He sounded panicked. "Someone came to my house," he said. "Last night. They didn't knock. Just stood on the lawn. My mom said she saw them around midnight, staring at my window." My stomach dropped. "Did she see what they looked like?" She said their face was wrong, too smooth, like it didn't have the right features. That was the last real conversation I had with Kyle. 2 days later, he disappeared. His car was found abandoned in a grocery store parking lot. No signs of struggle, no footage from the cameras. Just gone. I went back to the cabin once, the following summer. Alone, I needed answers, needed closure. I found the place unchanged, though the air felt thicker. I spent the night inside, clutching a flashlight and a baseball bat. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. The tapping. I ran out, but the forest was empty. No footprints, no movement. In the morning, I checked the area by the opposite shore. The jar was gone. In its place, a new item, a small, crudely made wooden doll tied with a string around the neck. Its eyes were pins, its mouth sewn shut. I never went back again. Story the end.
Story number 5.
I was 21 that summer, back home in rural Pennsylvania after finishing my junior year at Temple. My parents lived in a quiet, wooded area about 30 minutes outside Allentown, tucked deep enough into the pines that cell signal was a myth, and the nearest neighbor was half a mile down a gravel road. Most of the time, I appreciated the peace when I came back, especially after months of urban noise. But that particular summer, it started to feel more isolating than serene. It was unusually hot that year, even for June, the kind of oppressive heat that made the air thick and stale, like you were trying to breathe through wool. My mom and dad both worked full-time in the city, and I was in charge of keeping the house together while they were gone. Yard work, grocery runs, cleaning, nothing new. I'd usually get it all done in the morning and then spend the afternoons lying on the back porch, sweating with a beer and a book, trying not to melt. We had a black lab named Riley who was pushing 13 and didn't get around like she used to. But she still liked to patrol the yard in lazy loops and lie under the porch swing near me. I never felt alone with her around. That changed. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday morning, early. I had woken up around 5:30 to take Riley out before the sun got too hot. The forest had that blue-tinged light that comes right before sunrise, and everything was still except the hum of cicadas. Riley trotted down the back steps and sniffed the air in that focused way dogs do when they catch something odd. Then she growled. Not barked. Growled. Low, steady warning. She stood there, staring at the tree line about 30 feet away, her body tense, tail straight. I stepped onto the porch and squinted, thinking maybe a deer was out there. It wouldn't be unusual, but there was nothing. Just trees and shadows. Come on, Riley, I called. She didn't move. I walked down the steps toward her, a little uneasy now, and when I got closer, I saw her hackles were up. I put my hand on her collar and tried to tug her back gently, but she stood her ground, still staring. Then I heard it, a sharp cracking noise like a branch snapping underfoot. Not loud, but deliberate. It came from deep in the trees, but close enough to feel wrong. Riley barked once, loud, sharp, and bolted toward the house, nearly dragging me behind her. I didn't need much convincing. We went inside, and I locked the door. I told myself it was just an animal. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a fox. But something about the timing felt too precise, too curious. Like whatever was out there had been watching us and broke a branch on purpose. I didn't tell my parents when they got home that night. No reason to worry them over something that was probably nothing. But I started locking all the doors and windows, even during the day. And I started noticing other things. 2 days later, I found a pile of rocks on the porch. Just small ones, stacked in a neat little column right next to the back door. No one in my family did that. And Riley, who normally liked being out on the deck, refused to go near the door. She'd stand at the edge of the kitchen and whine until I closed the curtain. I asked my dad if he'd seen it, and he said no, probably a kid playing a prank. But we lived too far out for that to make sense. No one walked by. You couldn't even see our house from the road. That same night, just after midnight, I woke up to the sound of tapping, soft but rhythmic. I sat up in bed and held my breath, listening. It came again, tap, 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 against my bedroom window. Now I was on the second floor. I moved slowly toward the window, not even daring to breathe. My heart felt like it was vibrating. I reached out and pulled the curtain back just an inch. Nothing. No movement, no person, no animal, just the dark backyard and the swaying trees. I stayed up the rest of the night with my baseball bat beside me. The next morning, I checked under the window from outside. There were scrape marks on the siding, like something had climbed up. Not claw marks, just scrapes. Smooth ones, like something metal had been dragged against it. I finally told my parents that night. My dad didn't say much, but he checked the doors and windows and walked the perimeter with his hunting rifle. My mom was more shaken. She asked if I'd noticed anything else, and I told her about Riley's behavior, the tapping, the rocks. She didn't say much after that, but she started leaving the lights on in the hallway at night. The real terror began a week later. It was just after sunset when the power went out, all at once. Lights, AC, the fridge, everything died with a final hum. At first, we thought it was just a downed line. Summer storms weren't uncommon, but there were no clouds, no wind, just a dead silence that filled every room. My dad grabbed the emergency lantern and went out to check the fuse box. I stayed inside with my mom and Riley. The dog was pacing, agitated. Then she started barking again. Savage, loud, and sprinted toward the front door, growling like I'd never heard before. My mom grabbed my arm. "What is she doing?" I started toward the door but froze when I saw movement outside. Someone was standing at the edge of our yard, just beyond the reach of the porch light. A tall figure, still, watching. "Dad!" I shouted. He didn't answer. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, not holding anything, not gesturing, just standing. That stillness felt worse than if he had come running at us, like it was waiting. My dad came around from the back then, rifle in hand. He stopped when he saw the man. "Who the hell is that?" He stepped off the porch, calling out, "Hey, this is private property." No response. "Turn around and get out of here." Nothing. Then, finally, the figure turned, slowly, and walked back into the trees. We called the cops, of course. They came out about 30 minutes later. By then, the power had flickered back on. They did a sweep, didn't find anyone, didn't find tracks. They said it was probably a drifter or someone messing around. Told us to keep the lights on and call again if anything happened. But things kept happening. Almost every night for the next week, I'd hear movement outside. Footsteps on the gravel, scratching sounds at the windows. Once, I found one of Riley's old chew toys, something we'd buried with our last dog years ago, sitting on the back steps, dirt still clinging to the threads. I hadn't seen that toy in a decade. Riley got worse. She stopped eating. She'd only sleep curled up in the corner of my room, away from the windows. Her eyes were always darting, alert. She growled at shadows. Then she disappeared. I let her out just before dusk, stood on the porch with her like always. She wandered toward the tree line, ears perked. I called her back after a minute. She didn't come. I ran into the yard, yelling her name. Nothing. Silence. We searched for hours. My dad and I with flashlights and boots. My mom crying on the porch. Nothing. No barking. No yelping. No signs of a struggle. She was just gone. I don't know what broke in me then, but I stopped pretending it was random. I started sleeping downstairs with a knife under my pillow. My parents took shifts staying awake. None of us felt safe anymore. 2 nights later, I woke up to the smell of smoke. I bolted upright and saw the faint orange flicker outside the window. I ran to the door, heart hammering. There was a fire, a small one, burning at the edge of the woods. A perfect circle of flame, maybe 5 feet wide. Controlled, contained, and around it, figures. 3 of them, standing just outside the glow, motionless. I didn't even wake my parents. I didn't need to. I could hear them downstairs already, talking in hushed, terrified tones. My dad had his rifle. My mom was calling the police again. By the time the cops arrived, the fire was gone. Nothing but scorched grass, no footprints, no signs of anyone else. That was the last straw. My parents packed bags the next morning, and we left for my aunt's place in Jersey. Stayed there a week. When we came back, everything was quiet again, like nothing had happened. Like it had never been real. But I knew better. Riley never came back. We never found bones, fur, collar, anything. Just absence. That summer haunted me. Still does. I don't visit that house much anymore. My parents eventually sold it, said it was time to retire somewhere quieter. I didn't argue. Sometimes I dream about it, though, about standing on that porch, staring into the woods, seeing something stare back, something patient, something not quite human. And I wonder if it remembers me, too. Story the end.
Story number 6.
Every summer, Tyler and his cousin Sam would spend a few weeks with their grandparents in a rural part of Georgia. It was a tradition that dated back to when they were little kids, chasing fireflies barefoot in the fields and roasting marshmallows in the backyard. The area was peaceful, secluded, and a bit run down, but it was home in a way the city never could be. This particular summer, they were both 17. Old enough to drive, stay out late, and dig deeper into the kinds of adventures they'd only dreamed about before. Grandma and Grandpa still kept their routines, early to bed, early to rise, which meant the boys had long summer nights all to themselves. Most of the time, they just rode their bikes to the gas station for sodas or hung out by the old quarry past the tree line, skipping rocks and talking about everything and nothing. One evening, Sam brought up the lake. Not the one everyone swam in, not that family-friendly little basin near the campgrounds, but the one hidden deeper in the woods, way off the trails, the one no one really talked about unless they'd lived in the area a long time. "You ever hear about Stillwater?" Sam asked, lazily tossing a pebble into the quarry. "Sounds made up," Tyler muttered. "Nah, it's real. My buddy Wes said his uncle went out there once, said it's cursed or something." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "Cursed how?" Sam leaned in, lowering his voice like someone might be listening. "People go missing. Like, they go out there and just don't come back. And the ones that do come back, they're never right again. Wes said his uncle saw something in the water, like a shadow that moved even when the lake was still. Called it the thing under Stillwater." Tyler scoffed. "That's the dumbest name I've ever heard." "Yeah, well," Sam said, leaning back with a grin. "Still creepy, though." The conversation lingered in Tyler's mind. Over the next few days, they joked about it, half daring each other to find it. Then, one night, fueled by boredom and a stolen six-pack of beer from Grandpa's garage fridge, they decided to go. Finding Stillwater wasn't easy. The trail was barely a trail, more like a faded scar in the brush that hadn't been walked in years. They used a flashlight and Sam's phone GPS to navigate, though neither helped much once the thick woods swallowed them. After nearly 2 hours of stumbling through branches, uneven terrain, and what felt like a million mosquitoes, they finally saw the glimmer. It wasn't much, just a shimmer of moonlight bouncing off a perfectly still surface. Not a ripple, not a breeze. The lake looked like black glass. "Well, I'll be damned," Tyler muttered. "Still water," Sam said, grinning like he'd won something. The place felt strange, silent in a way the woods usually weren't. No crickets, no frogs, not even a distant owl. Just the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the low sound of their breathing. They sat down near the edge, opening a couple beers and trying to act like this was just another night out. But Tyler kept watching the water. Something about it didn't sit right. It looked too smooth, too perfect. Even when Sam tossed a rock into it, the splash was small. The ripples faded quicker than they should have. "You think that story about people disappearing is real?" Tyler asked. Sam snorted. "I think old people like to scare kids. Like, remember how Grandpa said the barn was haunted?" "Yeah, but I don't know, man. This place feels off." "Off how?" "I don't know." He hesitated, like something's watching us. Sam rolled his eyes but glanced around anyway. Then he laughed. "Dude, you're letting the beer get to you. It's just a lake. There's no monster in it." But then a sound cut through the quiet. It was faint at first, like the echo of a splash on the far side of the lake. Both boys froze. Sam turned to look, squinting. "Did you throw another rock?" "No," Tyler whispered. They listened. Nothing. Then again, a splash, this time closer. Not like something falling in, but something rising up, wet and slow. Tyler stood. "We should go." "Come on," Sam said, standing too. "It's probably just a deer," or a long, guttural dragging sound interrupted him, like something heavy was being pulled through mud. Both of them turned toward the noise. The flashlight caught only trees and underbrush. Nothing moved. Then the beam of light dipped toward the water. Tyler had barely raised the flashlight again when something flicked beneath the surface. A flash of white, maybe a hand, maybe something else. Too fast to be sure. Tyler grabbed Sam's arm. "We're leaving. Now?" Sam didn't argue. They stumbled back along the trail, moving faster than they should have, scraping branches and slipping on roots. Behind them, nothing followed. At least, nothing they could see or hear. But the feeling of being watched didn't fade. When they finally burst out of the woods and onto the gravel road near their grandparents' place, they didn't stop until they were back on the porch, panting and covered in sweat. Neither of them spoke about it the next day. or the one after. But Tyler couldn't shake it. That flash under the water, the sound like something crawling through sludge. At night, he kept waking up, heart pounding, sure he'd heard something outside the window. Wet footsteps, a dragging sound. He told himself it was the wind. Sam, though, started acting strange. He wasn't sleeping much, and when he did, he muttered in his dreams. Sometimes he'd stare off into space, his eyes unfocused. One night, Tyler caught him outside, barefoot and soaked, just standing in the backyard. "Dude, what are you doing?" he whispered harshly. Sam looked at him, confused. I don't know. I think I was dreaming. You're drenched. I was in the lake. I think you weren't. You were here." But Sam just shook his head. "It's calling me, man." Tyler didn't sleep much that night. The next evening, Tyler noticed something strange on Sam's leg, a deep scratch that looked like it had come from a claw or a jagged rock. "What happened?" he asked. Sam just looked at it and said, "I think it wants me to come back." That night, Sam was gone. Tyler woke up to an empty bed across the room. The screen from the bedroom window was pushed out. Panic hit him like a train. He ran out barefoot, not even bothering with a flashlight this time. He knew where Sam had gone, knew it with every fiber of his body. The woods felt different this time, colder, darker. The trail was easier to follow, though, as if something had cleared it since they last walked through. Branches were bent unnaturally. Some had fresh claw marks, deep and wet, like whatever had made them wasn't far ahead. Tyler didn't stop, not until he reached Stillwater, and there, standing ankle-deep in the glassy water, was Sam. He wasn't moving. "Sam!" Tyler yelled. No response. Tyler stepped closer, heart racing. "Sam, get out of there!" Sam finally turned. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. His skin looked pale, like something had drained the color from it. "I have to go," he said softly. "No, you don't. Come back. It's waiting." Something shifted beneath the surface behind him, a shape, massive, slow, rippling outward but not breaking the water. Then a hand, pale, long-fingered, reached up from beneath the lake and grabbed Sam's ankle. Tyler lunged forward, but Sam didn't fight, didn't scream. He just looked at Tyler one last time and said, "It's okay." And then he was gone, pulled under in a single, silent motion. The water didn't churn, it didn't even ripple, it just returned to its perfect glassy state, like nothing had happened. Tyler stood there, shaking, breath caught in his throat. He never found Sam. The police said it was a runaway case, maybe an accident, maybe a drowning, but there was no body, no sign of struggle, just Tyler's story and the impossible silence of a lake that no one admitted existed. He never told his grandparents the truth, never told his parents or the cops. But sometimes when he closes his eyes, he sees that pale hand, and he hears the slow dragging sound in his dreams. That summer changed everything. He never went back to the house. His grandparents sold it the year after, moved into town. But Tyler kept searching. Every year he goes back. He combs the woods trying to find Stillwater again. But the trail is gone, like it never existed. Some nights, when the world is quiet, he hears it again. A splash, a whisper, something wet moving just beyond the trees, and he knows, somewhere out there, the lake is still waiting. Story the end.
Story number 7.
I spent the summer after high school graduation working at a lakeside resort in northern Minnesota. My family wasn't wealthy, and college was looming. I needed to save every penny I could. The job paid just above minimum wage, but they gave me free housing in a small staff cabin and meals in the dining hall. I figured it was a good trade-off. The resort sat on a huge property, private forest land surrounding a deep glacial lake that looked black even in daylight. Some of the other staff joked about the lake being bottomless, but I never paid much attention to that. Locals always had stories. There were around 20 seasonal staffers, cooks, waiters, groundskeepers, and lifeguards. I worked maintenance, mostly mowing, trash collection, and the occasional plumbing patch-up. Not glamorous, but it gave me time alone and kept me out of the busy dining lodge where the tourists congregated. I was pretty introverted, and the quiet suited me fine. The staff cabins were tucked about a quarter mile from the main buildings, nestled between pine trees, barely visible from the road. Each one had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a screened-in porch. I shared mine with a guy named Tyler, one of the night shift cooks. We weren't close, but we got along. He was quiet, like me, and often kept to himself when he wasn't working. The summer heat arrived early that year, and by late June, The days were thick with humidity. Bugs swarmed every inch of air, especially at dusk, and the woods buzzed like a living thing. Despite the beauty of the place, I started feeling uneasy around that time. It began small. I'd hear snapping twigs behind me when I walked back from the lodge at night, or I'd get the feeling someone was watching me from between the trees. At first, I told myself it was just the wildlife. The forest was full of raccoons, deer, even the occasional black bear. Still, the sensation was too targeted, too persistent. One night, after a double shift, I got back to my cabin around 11:30. Tyler's car was gone. He must have been working late. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and immediately stopped. The air felt wrong. Too still. There was a smell, faint but strange, like damp earth and rust. I flicked the lights on and checked the kitchen, the bathroom, both bedrooms. Everything looked normal. Nothing moved. I chalked it up to being overtired and took a shower to cool off. When I came out, towel around my shoulders, I saw something that made my stomach drop. My bedroom window was open. I never opened that window. The screen had been pushed in from the outside, and there were dirty smudges along the sill. I walked over slowly and looked out. Just trees. Still. Breathless. I slept on the couch that night with the porch light on and a knife tucked under the blanket. Tyler came home after midnight looking tired and unfazed. I didn't mention the window. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But the next morning, I asked around to see if anyone else had noticed strange things happening. Most just laughed, said I was spending too much time alone in the woods. But one of the older groundskeepers, Eddie, pulled me aside when no one else was around. "You hear something out there, didn't you?" he asked. I nodded. He rubbed his stubbled chin and said, "Don't go past the old ranger trail after dark. You'll know it when you see the carved stone by the split tree." "Why not?" He hesitated. "Just don't. Some things don't want to be seen." I waited for him to laugh, but he didn't. He just turned and walked away. That evening, after my shift, I decided to find the trail Eddie mentioned. Curiosity overrode caution. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I walked about 2 miles out along the lake perimeter, past the guest cabins and deeper into the woods where the trees grew thicker and the undergrowth turned to ferns and moss. Eventually I saw it, a split birch tree with a flat stone embedded at its base. Carvings lined the stone's face. Worn symbols, not letters I recognized. The trail behind it looked barely used, more like a faint depression in the ground than a path. I stepped onto it. For a while, it just wound through the woods, and quiet except for the insects and the crunch of leaves under my boots. Then I started noticing things. Bones hanging from the trees, small animal skeletons tied with string, stones stacked in perfect towers, tree bark peeled off in long strips exposing raw wood beneath. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not behind me, beside me, moving in sync just beyond the trees. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. I turned slowly, scanning the dense foliage, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. Nothing. Just shadows. I called out, "Hello?" Silence. Then a whisper. Not words. Just the sound of someone breathing in through their teeth. I didn't wait to see who or what was there. I turned and ran, nearly tripping over tree roots, slapping branches out of my face, sprinting back toward the resort lights in the distance. I didn't stop until I was back on the main path, my shirt soaked through and my hands trembling. I told myself it was some messed up local ritual site, maybe kids playing a joke. But the breath, that stayed with me. Over the next few days, things got worse. My cabin door was found open one morning, even though I had locked it. One of my shirts disappeared, then reappeared 2 days later on the porch, folded but stained with something brown and sticky. The forest seemed louder. Birds stopped singing when I walked by, and every night the whispering returned, from just outside the cabin, faint but constant. Tyler noticed it too. One night I found him sitting on the porch steps, a kitchen knife in his lap, his face pale. He didn't say anything when I sat beside him, just stared at the trees. After a long while he muttered, "They don't want us here." "Who?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know." That was the last time I saw him. The next morning he was gone. His stuff was still there, wallet, phone, keys, but his bed was made and untouched. I reported it to management. They called the sheriff, who organized a search party. Dogs, volunteers, the whole thing. They found his hat near the lake's edge. Nothing else. No footprints, no blood. Just the still black water. The resort stayed open, but people were tense. Whispers flew through the staff cabins about disappearances in past summers, quietly handled, no police involved. I confronted the manager, a red-faced man named Dennis. He denied everything. Said Tyler probably just left. Kids get overwhelmed out here. But I didn't believe him. I started documenting everything, photos, notes, audio recordings at night. I set up my phone to record by the window. One morning, I watched the footage and saw something that made my blood turn cold. At 3:17 a.m., the whispering grew louder. Then, something moved past the window. It was fast, but the camera caught enough. A tall figure, pale skin, no clothes. Its arms were too long, bending slightly the wrong way. Its head turned toward the camera, and for one single frame, its eyes glinted white in the dark. No pupils, no eyelids. I packed my bags that night, but when I tried to drive out the next morning, my car wouldn't start. Battery drained. I checked under the hood and found something lodged in the engine, a bundle of feathers, bones, and what looked like human hair tied with a strip of my missing shirt. I called a tow truck. No signal. I walked half a mile down the road, still no signal. I knew then I wasn't going to make it out easy. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with my flashlight and a crowbar, listening. At 2:41 a.m., the lights went out. Complete blackness. I heard footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. Something brushed against the window screen. Then a voice, low and crackling like dried leaves, whispered my name. I screamed and swung the crowbar at the window. The glass shattered outward. Silence followed. Then laughter. From the woods. Dozens of voices. I ran. I didn't think. I grabbed my boots, shoved on a backpack, and bolted toward the service road. The forest felt alive, trees groaning in the wind, but there was no wind. Just breath. Surrounding me, inside my ears. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway, 6 miles away. A truck driver picked me up at dawn. I never looked back. The resort called my parents, said I'd left abruptly and would not be welcome to return. No refund, no explanation. 2 more staff members went missing that August. The place closed early for the season. Official word was financial difficulties. I've tried to forget that summer. Tried to tell myself it was just stress, imagination, mass hysteria. But some nights, when the air is too still and the woods outside my apartment go quiet, I hear the whisper again. And I remember the eyes in the dark. Story the end.
Story number 8.
It was the summer of 2012 when I took a job as a camp counselor at a remote summer camp in the Adirondacks. The camp, called Pine Hollow, was nestled deep in the woods, far from the nearest town. It was a classic summer camp, run-down cabins, a huge mess hall, a lake for swimming, and woods to explore. I had heard about it from a friend who'd worked there the year before. He said it was the perfect job for someone looking to get away from it all. I didn't know much about the camp's history, except that it had been around for decades. The camp's website had a few photos of smiling kids and activities like archery, canoeing, and hiking. It seemed like the kind of place that could be fun and peaceful, a nice retreat from the stresses of city life. When I arrived, I was assigned to a small cabin with a couple of other counselors, including Sarah and Mike, both in their late 20s. They had been working at the camp for several years and were familiar with the routines. Sarah was friendly but a bit distant, always seeming to be lost in her thoughts, while Mike was easygoing and jovial. We all got along well, at least at first. The first few days were busy with orientation and setting up for the campers' arrival. We ran through the usual routine, rules, schedule, cabin assignments, and spent our free time cleaning and preparing. The camp was isolated, and there was something about the place that made me uneasy. The forest surrounding the camp was dense and dark, and there was a heavy stillness to it that felt unnatural. Even though it was summer, the air always felt cool, almost too cool, and the wind had a strange whispering quality when it blew through the trees. One evening, while the 3 of us were sitting around the campfire, Mike mentioned something strange. "You know," he said, stirring the flames with a stick, "I've heard stories about this place. Some of the old-timers who used to work here, they say the camp has a history, a bad one." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of history?" Mike leaned in, lowering his voice. "It's not something they tell the kids, but the camp has had its share of accidents over the years. Weird stuff. People disappearing. Strange noises in the woods at night." I chuckled, thinking he was just trying to scare me. But when I looked at Sarah, she was staring at the fire, her face serious. "What happened?" I asked. She looked up, her expression blank. The camp was built on old land. There are stories about what happened here long before it became a camp, before it was even a settlement. People say there's something in the woods, something that doesn't want anyone here. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. That's just campfire stories. It's just old superstitions. But Sarah didn't respond. She didn't laugh. She just looked back at the fire, like she was waiting for something. The next day, the campers arrived. A group of excited kids filled the cabins, and the camp became a whirlwind of activity. Swimming, archery, arts and crafts, everything felt like a typical summer camp experience. But as the days passed, I began to notice strange things. It started small. One evening, after a swim, I went to the changing rooms to grab my towel. As I walked down the hallway, I felt something watching me. I turned, but there was no one there. The feeling was like someone was standing just out of sight, waiting. I shook it off as a trick of the mind, but the feeling lingered. The next night, we held a campfire sing-along with the kids. As we were singing, I noticed that one of the cabins seemed darker than the rest, as if it were cast in shadow even though the fire was nearby. It was Cabin 13, the one closest to the edge of the woods. I asked Sarah about it later. "Why is Cabin 13 always so dark?" I asked. She looked at me, her face tight. "Some things don't need to be explained. Just don't go near it. Not at night." I didn't press her further. The next day, I noticed a group of kids playing near the cabin. They were laughing, having fun, but when I walked over to them, they stopped. The youngest of the group, a kid named Timmy, looked up at me with wide eyes. "Why don't you go inside?" I asked, trying to make a joke. He shook his head. "No one's allowed in there. Not after dark." "Why not?" Timmy glanced around nervously before whispering, "That's where the bad stuff happened." I laughed uneasily and walked away. But the more I thought about it, the more I wondered what had happened in that cabin. That night, things started to get weirder. I was in my cabin reading a book when I heard something, a low, humming sound, almost like a chant. At first, I thought it was the wind. But when I listened closely, I realized it was coming from the woods. It was rhythmic, like a group of people singing or chanting in some strange foreign language. I got up and opened the door to listen better. The air outside was thick, almost oppressive. I could hear the trees creaking in the distance, but the humming grew louder, clearer. It was coming from the direction of Cabin 13. I stepped outside, my heart racing. I walked towards the cabin, not sure why. Maybe I was curious, or maybe I was just trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. The further I went into the woods, the darker it became, and the air grew colder. The humming was now a full-blown chant, reverberating through the trees. It was like it was coming from all directions at once. I felt like I was being drawn into something that wanted me there. And then I saw it. A figure standing in front of the cabin. At first, I thought it was a person, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't human. It was tall, too tall, and its limbs were unnaturally long. It was draped in what looked like dark, tattered cloth, but I couldn't see its face. It was just a silhouette, a shadow against the cabin's dim light. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The chanting stopped abruptly. The figure turned, slowly, as if it had been waiting for me. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The figure tilted its head as if it was studying me, and then it disappeared into the trees. I don't remember how I got back to my cabin. I must have run, but I don't remember the details. When I got inside, my heart was pounding in my chest. I locked the door and sat on the bed, my mind racing. The next morning, I told Sarah what had happened. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and pity. "You shouldn't have gone out there," she said quietly. "There are things in the woods, things that aren't human. They don't like it when people come too close." I wanted to ask more, but she stopped me. "Just forget what you saw. Forget everything about that place. It's not worth it." But I couldn't forget. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the chanting again, faint at first, but growing louder. It was like it was calling to me, beckoning me into the woods. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. This time I didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to let fear stop me. The air was cold, the trees silent as I made my way to Cabin 13. But when I reached it, the chanting had stopped. The cabin was empty. Silent. I felt a sense of relief, but then something caught my eye. A dark stain on the wooden floor of the porch. I bent down to look at it, and my stomach turned. It was blood, dried and caked into the wood. A voice behind me made me freeze. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The chant began again, louder now, coming from the trees. I ran back to my cabin, but I could hear footsteps following me, slow and deliberate. When I reached the door, I slammed it shut and locked it, my hands trembling. I didn't sleep that night, and I didn't stay much longer at Pine Hollow. The next day, I packed my things and left, never looking back. I heard later that the camp had closed down after another incident. More kids had gone missing. But I knew it was more than just bad luck. It was the land. Something old, something evil lived in those woods, and it wasn't finished with me. Story the end.